Hey, what's going on, Giants fans? Welcome to the latest episode of our Talk is Cheap Giants podcast. From NJ Advanced Media, the Star Ledger, and NJ.com, Daryl Slater here with Bob Brookover. We're talking to you Tuesday morning right now as we're recording this. And as you all obviously know, we know the Giants were going to the playoffs once they beat the Colts in Week 17, and the results of Week 18 games locked them into what we figured was going to be the matchup once the Packers had beat the Vikings in Week 17, and that is the rematch of the Christmas Eve loss the Giants had in Minnesota. So they head up Sunday afternoon, 4:30 in Minnesota against the Vikings, a 13-14 that, as we'll get into, has looked fairly beatable at times. They had a minus 19 point differential heading into their final regular season game. And of course, the Giants on Sunday rested starters. A lot to digest here. If you are traveling for the game, by the way, it looks like the weather will not be too bad. Low 30s, which is basically,
Balmy.
I was about to use that exact word, balmy in Minnesota for January. So, Bob, a lot to talk about here as the Giants get ready for their first playoff game since 2016 and try to win a playoff game for the first time in 11 years since their Super Bowl victory. They're back in the playoffs for just the second time since that Super Bowl championship win over the Patriots. And it's an opportunity for Brian Daboll and this team to continue this magical season.
Yeah, and you wouldn't think they would have gotten any momentum from resting their starters in Philadelphia, but they sort of did because the reserves, kept themselves in a game, more than covered the spread. I think the spread ended at 16. They lost by 6, and showed maybe they have a little more depth than we all thought they did, but certainly we've thought all season that they had fight, and they showed fight in that game. I thought Saquon Barkley had the quote of the day by calling it a thing of beauty. Basically said it inspired the rest of the guys who were sitting out, the starters, to watch the reserves play that well. And now we see, it seems like, I flat out asked Saquon, are you guys a hot team? After the Eagles game, and he said, "Yeah, I think we are." And you know what? I think he's right because they had their biggest win of the season in their biggest game of the season against the Colts. They needed it to win, and they won convincingly. Bad Colts team, I'm sure, but you know, 2 weeks before that, they had taken down the Commanders in a game they had to win. And in between there, they played the same Vikings, and they played them as tough as could be on the road. Took them to the very last play of the game, and it took a 61-yard kick to beat them. And I'll just mention this since I went through the trouble figuring it out, was the sixth time in NFL history that a kicker has kicked a 60-yard field goal at the buzzer to beat a team. On the flip side of that, the Giants have been the victim of three of those 60-yard kicks 3 times in the last 7 years. With, as Graham Gano shouted at me in the locker room on Sunday, I'm part of that. So we'll see what happens. Now they go to Minnesota. They got a chance, thinking they're a hot team, believing they're a hot team. See if that momentum carries them to a victory in the divisional round of the playoffs.
Yeah, that's a remarkable stat. And the Giants obviously 6-1 start to the season, then 7-2, and then hit a little bit of a skid, lose to the Lions, lose to the Cowboys, tie the Commanders, lose to the Eagles, and then it sort of becomes, oh, okay, how does Brian Daboll's team respond? And boy, did they ever respond. With the win over Washington, they almost beat. They got a chance almost to go to overtime and beat Minnesota. So they know this, and then as you mentioned, the Colts win. They know that this Vikings team is beatable, and certainly maybe some of the history of the Vikings playoff failures will play into this. But just recapping real quick, Week 18. Obviously, the Giants didn't try to win that game. They finished 9-7-1. Doesn't the result doesn't really matter, but I think really a really good decision, obviously, by Brian Daboll to rest starters in that game. That's a smart call. I mean, there was no reason to give into nostalgia and all the '07 Tom Coughlin, storybook stuff that people love to tell these, as my good pal James Cratch, who used to work for us, says, the storybook or something of Big Blue bedtime stories. All these like notions that people cling to sometimes of this franchise of that type of nostalgia stuff. It had no bearing on this team. Like, okay, yeah, the Giants, Patriots, '07, undefeated. Has nothing related to this team. Anyway, play to win.
Frank Gifford would have played if he wasn't deceased.
Play to win the game and all this stuff. Whatever. The bottom line is this team is thin. and yeah, they do have depth, obviously a little bit more than we thought, but they needed to rest. This was their ninth straight game. So they played eight. Their starters played 8 straight games coming out of the bye. 8 straight games before the bye. The rest was important. Um, and why was it important? And I think here's a couple. We'll touch on the injury situation right now. Adoree Jackson's got a knee injury. We know he hasn't played since November 20th. Azeez Ojulari's got a lateral ankle sprain. I would think he'd be able to try to push through it for at least some of this game. He played 7 snaps against the Colts. Leonard Williams dealing with a nerve issue in his neck. I would be absolutely floored if he didn't play in this game. This guy's played 6,000 snaps waiting to get to the playoffs. His whole career has dealt with so much losing. He's not missing this game. The big question to me is really Adoree Jackson because they have to defend Justin Jefferson.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's the biggest part of the Vikings is their passing game with Hockenson at tight end and Justin Jefferson, just two beasts at those positions. They did not defend him very well the first time around. Jefferson kind of had his way with them. And you add in Adam Thielen is not what he used to be, but still a real threat. So being as healthy as you can in the secondary is really important. And I'll just throw in, Jason Pinnock got banged up in the Eagles game. Was one of the guys who played. He said he had a stinger, but he would be ready to play. That doesn't always mean they will be, but he sounded like he'd be ready to play, and that obviously he helps them in situations, especially as a blitzer. That he oftentimes when they when Xavier McKinney was healthy earlier in the season, they would bring him in blitz packages, and he was effective. So I'm sure they hope to have him back too. But shutting down, I don't know if you can shut down Justin Jefferson, but they got to do a better job than they did on him in the first game.
Yeah, absolutely. And if Pinnock can't play, Dane Belton would play as a third safety, and he has looked a little bit overwhelmed at times out there, as you might imagine for a rookie. And Adoree Jackson played it secretive after the game. He didn't sound overly frustrated. So to me, it just sounded like he was just lying. Like, whatever, he can lie if he wants. It's not like the guy's on the witness stand and we got his hand in the Bible here. But
He's treated the whole thing weirdly though, all the way
yeah.
all the way along.
So I thought he did say, "Oh, I said, are you gonna be ready?" I don't know. Okay, fine, whatever. We're gonna play that game. We're gonna take fine. But maybe he does know and he's not saying. But the one thing I said, I presume you'd be willing to play hurt, and he goes, I don't know. Well, like I'm not trying to call the guy soft. Like that's not. And he raised a point, and I'll just put it out here, and you can make your own judgment about it as you're listening. He said that he didn't want to go up there on basically 1.5 legs against Justin Jefferson and do anything to hinder the Giants' chances of winning the game. And he made it clear it's not about my pride, my being him, my performance per se. It's just about I don't want to do anything that would hinder the team. Well, you could argue, and I wasn't going to get into the back and forth with him about it, that Adoree Jackson at 80% is better than Fabian Moreau at 100%, right? So, or Nick McLeod, who has had moments this year, but the bottom line is Adoree Jackson's a playoff tested cornerback. So whatever, we're going to go down that rabbit hole with him, but it was an interesting comment, I thought.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you go back to, Xavier McKinney was the one who said, he's been shut down before. Told you on Sunday, Justin Jefferson's been shut down before. Other teams have done it, and he's right. The Cowboys in crushing, and this is the Vikings' only home loss of the season. They lost 40-3 to the Cowboys, and Jefferson was 3 for 33 that day. After the week before going 10 for 193 against the Bills, which is pretty impressive performance. And who some of the other teams that shut him down. Detroit shut him down 3 for 14 the first time, but he came back and went 11 for 123 against them. The Packers a few weeks ago shut him down 1 for 15 yards. That was his worst game of the season. But the Eagles kind of shut him down to 6 for 48 in week 2. We're going back all the way to week 2 there, but there are few, and the Jets did a pretty good job on him, 7 for 45. But there's a lot more of big games. He was only 4 for 38, but I'm pretty sure the Vikings pulled off against the Bears on in week 18. I know Cousins came out of that game, so I imagine Jefferson probably did too. You can do it. It's not easy to do, but the fact that the Vikings have only lost once all season at home is a pretty daunting task.
That's a great stat, and they've played really well in close games, obviously, which is how you wind up being 12-4 going into the last week of the season with a minus 19 point differential. Um, and so, yeah, I think the crazy stat. Excuse me, one of them about Jefferson. That his 133 against the Giants was the seventh highest total for him this year. I mean,
Yeah.
insane. The guy's the best receiver in the NFL. Period. End of discussion. But the bottom line is the Giants maybe would have had a chance to win that game in overtime if he hadn't had the 17-yard catch on 3rd and 11. Sets up the 61-yard field goal, which both of those things are improbable. 17 yards on 3rd and 11, and also the 61-yard field goal. Again, it's not like the Giants were winning. If they had won the game in overtime, the game was tied. Everyone knows that. If they had won, they would have made the playoffs in that. But
that week,
ultimately, they're in as the 6, which is the best they were going to do anyway. It all worked out. They got the rest of their starters. They drew an absolutely a AAA team in the Colts and in week 17, and so the Giants now in trying to overcome Justin Jefferson, trying to overcome that setting in Minnesota, which will be extremely loud. One other thing kind of perhaps working in their favor, I think you could, is it working against them or not? Their lack of playoff experience. I'll run it down real quick here. All the guys who haven't played in a playoff game on this team, like everyone knows, Daniel Jones, Dexter Lawrence, all the main guys that of their regular starters, including their special teams players, 7 of them have played in a playoff game. John Feliciano's got 7, Graham Gano 7, Adoree Jackson 6, and who knows if he's going to play. Mark Lewinsky 5, Jalen Smith 2, Jamie Gillen, the punter 2, and Fabian Moreau 1. So when you're talking about like some of those guys are less important than others to whether they're going to win the game.
The most important one might be Graham Gano.
Exactly right. So do you think the Giants' lack of playoff experience will be an issue in this game?
I really don't. I think sometimes it can play to your advantage because you have some naivety to the whole thing. You don't let the whole big situation get to you. I think their playoff experience, and I think Brian Dable said on Monday he thinks it's overrated, but I think if Brian Dable goes back and looks at all his years with the Patriots, I'm sure and he used Tom Brady's first season at his first Super Bowl as an example, which is fine because Tom Brady was very inexperienced when he took over for Drew Bledsoe that year. But I think if he goes back and looks at the Super Bowls that came after that and the playoff runs that came after that, he'll find that the Patriots experience came through. The experience of Brady and Belichick and many others on those teams certainly probably came through many times and, allowed them to either A, win close games or B, just annihilate teams because they were A, better and B, experienced. But I don't think in this situation it's that big a deal for the Giants, and I'll take the other side of this. You have the Vikings, who are known for their playoff failures. Kirk Cousins under a ton of pressure. He's paid a lot of money to come to Minnesota and win playoff games. He's only played in 2 since he's been there. The Vikings the Vikings are a team known for losing 4 Super Bowls. We're going all the way back into the 70s. They lost all 4 of them in the 70s. They lost 4 of the first 11 Super Bowls. So they're known for that. Not that impacts these guys now, but in years since they've lost. They're known for losing in the playoffs. They lost in the division round 3 years ago. Lost 2 years before that. They got crushed by the Eagles in the conference championship game when they were 13-3. Lost a wild card game in 15. Lost a wild card game in 12. Got crushed by the Giants, and we go back to the top of the century, 2041-0. Their franchise history is all about losing in the playoffs, and that's something that questions that the Vikings will be facing all week as they get ready for this game.
No doubt, the ghosts of those things
Excuse me.
will linger, and like you said, Kirk Cousins now in what, year 5 in with the Vikings. It seems like a lifetime ago that we were thinking, oh, will he sign with the Jets? And it was between the Jets and the Vikings, and it's like, oh, it's okay, it's all right. The Jets got Sam Darnold in the drafts, or whatever. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, Kirk Cousins is a fascinating story himself. He's a fourth round pick who was taken in the same draft on the same team with RG3, who seems like he's been retired for 2 decades now. A fourth round pick. And I was looking at this yesterday. He's probably the best fourth round quarterback ever drafted ever. I mean, he's 23rd all time in uh, TD passes in the NFL, 28th in yards. He's got a higher career passer rating than Tom Brady, but none of that's going to mean anything if his resume doesn't have at least a Super Bowl appearance on it. You know, none of that will matter.
Great point. I mean, made the Pro Bowl last year, made the Pro
Made
Bowl
it
this
four
year.
times, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you could look at it and say, he's had these playoff failures, but he's still a pretty darn good quarterback. And on the flip side of the Giants' lack of experience is the fact that their coach, as everyone knows, their rookie head coach Brian Dable has coached in he's coached in 30 playoff games, and like you said, later on in the Patriots' tenure, the fact that they had experience. Oh, and by the way, maybe the greatest player in the history of the sport, it
And maybe
probably
the
helped.
greatest head coach in the history of the sport.
Probably, yeah, probably helped them. It's like kind of some selective stat picking by Brian Dable there. But the Patriots in in Brian Dable's 30 playoff games. Granted, this is his first as head coach. His teams are 23-7, 20-4 with the Patriots, 3-3 with the Bills. He's been to the playoffs each of the past 3 seasons. So he's been to the playoffs a ton. I mean, 14 playoff games from 2000 to 06 with the Pats. And then he kind of wandered in the wilderness there with the Jets, Browns, Dolphins, Chiefs from 07 to 12. And then he did 10 games with the Pats in the playoffs from 13 to 16. And oh, by the way, he has a college national championship and 5 Super Bowl rings. So he's been here. He's been in this situation. He's not only been to the playoffs, won in the playoffs. Granted, he was an assistant coach, so it wasn't like he was the sole reason those Patriots teams were winning in the playoffs. Obviously, he had a much bigger role with the Bills as their offensive coordinator. But I do think, you know, being rattled or not being rattled, clearly, he's been in this setting, so I can't imagine he'll be rattled by the environment. And also the Giants again just played in Minnesota, so I can't imagine that that'll be something that's going to be a big problem for them in terms of being able to handle the environment. It's more in this situation. I think it's about can they win these matchups and can they contain Justin Jefferson? Can
Yeah,
they get Kirk
it
Cousins?
is, and I think it's and he says it, and he's right. And it's also about the process of how you prepare and what you do on game day in terms of uh, making the right calls and being in the right place. It is a lot about preparation. Have you prepared properly for what you need to do against the Vikings on that day, and then has that preparation become manifested itself on the field on game day. They were obviously very well prepared to play against the Vikings, especially offensively the first time around. I mean, they put up a season high 445 yards in that game. So they were very prepared offensively in that game. They left points on the field. They should have won that game. They left at least 6 points, probably more like 10 on the field, and then gave the Vikings 7 points in that game. So they were prepared to play. The mistakes they made were huge mistakes and cost them the game, but they were prepared to play, and I would be shocked if they weren't again on Sunday.
And we will touch on this real quick about that we're talking about being the fact that they were able to move the ball against the Vikings. Season high, I believe, 445 yards. Mike Kafka, the Giants' offense coordinator, who calls their plays, Brian Dable gave him the play calling duties, starting obviously at the start of the season. He'll interview. Well, he was requested by the Panthers, who have a vacancy for head coach, to interview. That'll happen if it does happen, presuming it happens next week, because the Giants play in the wild card rounds, so the NFL rules state he can't do that interview until next week. Obviously, the Giants not like a high powered offense this year in terms of where they ranked and things like PFF, 24th in PFF, but seventh in red zone offense. So that and what Mike Kafka's done in terms of helping Brian Dable is or in terms of helping Daniel Jones, I should say, along with Brian Dable, of course, helping Daniel Jones. Uh, he's up. He's had a productive year, no doubt. Daniel Jones has, and Mike Kafka getting this interview. We'll see. A lot of other offensive minds interviewing down there, but it'll be he hasn't gotten as much run as Wink Martindale in recent off seasons as a head coach, but he's certainly a name to watch. And this off
Right.
season,
And the fact he has Kansas City roots, I'm sure it probably helps him too. So
for sure, the Andy Reid pedigree definitely helps. Obviously, that's not going to have a huge impact or really any impact on this game. One thing that will, and we had to do a little blurb, and one of the things was X factor, right, for this game. I put Azeez Ojulari as sort of the X factor, right? I mean, he has
great
dealt with
one.
calf. Um, calf injuries early on. He has only played in 7 games this year. He sprained his ankle in Minnesota, only wound up playing 22 snaps in that game, came back the next week, played 7 against the Colts. A little bit of an unknown. We'll see if he can pressure Kirk Cousins, but man, was he hot before that Minnesota game. He had 7, 3, and 5 pressures in his previous 3 games before that. He had one pressure and 15 pass rush snaps against the Vikings, so he was really hitting a stride in his return from his calf injury. Hadn't played since week 4 before he returned for the tie against Washington in week 13 and really hit the ground running. He'd be huge, right? I presume he's going to try to play through whatever he's dealing with, but how effective will he be?
That's the big question. What's he got? 5.5 sacks in 7 games. He had a sack in the Minnesota game. Uh, that's how he got hurt. That's how he hurt his ankle on a sack. He's got 5.5 sacks in 7 games and 3 forced fumbles in 7 games.
He's played
So
really well.
he's an impact player, and I also think he makes the rest of the defense better, especially Kayvon Thibodeau. I thought, when he came back from the calf injury in week 13, I thought Kayvon Thibodeau's play went to another level. And it was, you got to give most of the credit to Kayvon for that, but it certainly helps when the guy on the other side has to be accounted for too. And the Giants are going to need to put pressure on that. That's we talked about the secondary, but obviously always a big part of the secondary being effective is how much pressure they can put up front. And in that regard, the Vikings could be without their center again. Bradbury is still not a definite go for them. That's big advantage, Giants, when you think about who the center has to block, which is Dexter Lawrence, who is the Giants, I would say, their best defensive player this year. Wink Martindale said it last week, the centerpiece, the focal point of our defense. So there are some things playing to the Giants' favor here.
I think Dexter Lawrence is their best player, period. I mean, he doesn't play the most important position, but he's certainly been their most effective player. And just building off that, we have plenty of time to talk offseason stuff, but I saw where Quinnen Williams, who like Dexter Lawrence is a really good, really elite defensive tackle, and like Dexter Lawrence was drafted in 2019. Quinnen Williams says, he wants a new contract this offseason, and he's skipping voluntary spring workouts if he doesn't get it, which is really a player's only leverage. And quite frankly, Dexter Lawrence should also refuse to play on the 5th-year option. Like, the Giants have plenty of cap space. He should say, I'm not playing for, way less than I'm worth and risking it on the 5th-year option. He needs to tell this team, pay me this offseason, because they can. I know everyone's talking about Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley. They need to take care of Dexter Lawrence this offseason, just like the Jets are doing or should be doing or with Quinnen Williams, who wants to, is basically drawing a line in the sand and saying, do this. And he should be doing that as well, Dexter Lawrence, but plenty of time to deal with that. Obviously, he's going to be a huge factor in however far the Giants go in these playoffs. And as you mentioned, that the weak point there and potentially in the middle of the Vikings offensive line. And obviously, Wink Martindale is going to just do what he always does. He's going to blitz. And the question then becomes, can the secondary, which gets Xavier McKinney back, who wasn't there on Christmas Eve, can they hold up against Justin Jefferson? That's really what I think it comes down to. If Wink Martindale is going to be himself and blitz, can this secondary answer the call?
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to that. And let's and I mentioned him earlier, and I'll mention him again. Just T.J. Hawkinson, how much damage he did in that first game.
Yeah.
And when I was asking Jason Pinnock about the Vikings offense, he actually mentioned Hawkinson before he mentioned Justin Jefferson, which I imagine that's because he was probably had some responsibilities on Hawkinson in that game. But Hawkinson caught 13 for 109 and two touchdowns in that Christmas Eve game. He was an absolute beast and has been since the Vikings got him from the Lions. I bet you the Lions somewhat are wondering after just missing out on the playoffs, wondering maybe we should have kept that guy. But after in the 10 games since the Vikings got him, he's 60 catches for 519 yards and three touchdowns, including the two against the Giants. So I mean, if you're looking at X factors from the other side, it might be that guy.
No doubt. And I think we can all agree, or both agree, I guess there's only two of us here, as we break down this matchup, that this is definitely the preferable matchup for the Giants. And they should be thanking Aaron Rodgers that that the Packers were able to beat the Vikings and knock the Vikings down to the 3 seed. And the Giants do not have to play the 49ers, who that would have been a trip across the country to play a team they haven't played, to play an insanely good defense. And their point differential, I think, is like second best in the NFL. The Giants have a much better chance of winning this game. I think everyone can agree than winning that game. So they ought to be thankful for that. I would think, right? You agree?
Yeah, I don't think they wanted any part of the Niners. I think the Niners are the team that nobody in the NFC wants any part of. I'd be shocked if they lost to the Seahawks in the first round. I don't think that's going to happen. But they're the team I don't think anybody wants to see, and which is shocking with their own third string quarterback who has become one of the probably top five stories in the NFL this year with how well he has played. Brock Purdy since he's come into the picture. They've had an amazing season given the loss of their two quarterbacks. So yeah, you definitely want the Vikings. You've already played them. You played them as tough as can be. You won the statistical battle in that game. Took the 61-yard field goal to beat you. Hey, you know, go to Minnesota, see what you can do.
For sure. And if the Giants do what they want to do in Minnesota and win that game, and if the Niners beat the Seahawks, then the Giants will be getting that rematch. The only way the Giants don't say the Giants will, let's assume the Giants win, which is certainly an assumption. Uh, the only way the Giants will not play the divisional round in Philadelphia is if Seattle somehow shocks the Niners in suburban San Jose. And so that would be a fascinating divisional round game. And then that would put San Francisco up against either Dallas or Tampa in the divisional round as the 2 seed versus the winner of the 4-5, the Eagles the 1, playing Giants the 6. So since I'm sitting here and assuming certain things are going to happen or maybe not happen, we can finish this up with our picks. And I'm scrolling through my email to try to find what I exactly picked, but go ahead and give me your rundown of this game, and if you can find it, the score that you picked for this one.
Yeah, I'm trying to find my own pick. Here we go. I got him here. Um, so I think the Giants can do this. I think they can pull it off. I do think I was there when they lost this game, and I saw how well they played on offense and how they were able to move the ball. I think that they can limit the turnovers that they had in the first game. Uh, I'm going to do what I've done the last two times they've played their regulars and predict that they're going to eclipse that 30 points again, and they're going to beat the Vikings 31-28.
Well, they certainly did it in Minnesota the first time, was scoring 24, and that at that point I think had been 43 straight games since they had not scored 30, and then they went out the next week and they scored a legit 30 against the Vikings, as in their offense scored 30, 31, and they got 38 in that game. I meant the Colts, of course. And so I can't find my pick per se right now. Here, where is it? Okay, there it
I
is.
got it. You want to know it?
I got it. I got it in front of me now. I'll go again. I think the Giants can win this game. There's no doubt about it. I give them probably a 40 to 45% chance of winning the game versus say a 25 to 35% chance if they were going to San Francisco. But I'm going to go Vikings 38, Giants 28. Giants will be able to move the ball. Too much Justin Jefferson. I think even if Adoree Jackson does play, you're talking about a guy coming off a sprained MCL who hasn't played a full game in 2 months against the best receiver in the NFL. Um, the Giants are really going to have to score a lot if they're going to win this game, I think. And
I
they're
would
really
agree with
not. Yeah, I mean, 21 points, there's no chance they're going to win this game. I think they got it. They have to score, at least say 28 to 30 to win the game. But I think they'll get there to 28. I'll give the Vikings 38. But look, I mean, the line's 3. The line is 3 points. And so
that.
it gives,
That means the odds makers think these two teams are pretty even, and I think they're probably right.
yeah, and usually you get that's because Vegas typically gives the home team 3 points. And for a team that's only lost once at home all year and is 13-4 as the 3 seed playing a 6 seed who is 9-7-1 and has not surge down the stretch. I think it's pretty remarkable to see that line at 3. Not remarkable, but interesting and certainly encouraging for Giants fans. So, yeah, we will wrap it up with that. We appreciate everyone listening. Be sure to rate, review, like, subscribe on all your favorite podcasting platforms. And, regardless of what happens this weekend in Minnesota, we will be back here with you next week, either previewing what probably will be a divisional round game in
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia, or I guess or wrapping up the season, or the other possibility would be what if the Niners lose, then Seattle goes to Philadelphia and the Giants would go to Dallas or Tampa. So that's how that would work, right? Unless I'm like completely botching that.
No,
Um,
you got it. You
that's
nailed it.
right. So
If
there
those
you go.
things happen, I'll be stunned.
A lot of things that left to be determined this weekend. The Giants will know, by the way, because they play 4 o'clock Sunday, 4:30 Sunday. They will know what happens in the San Francisco game because that one's on Saturday. So they'll know whether they're going to be going to Philly or going to the Dallas Tampa winner, which that game is Monday. But the Giants obviously have to take care of business. And as I said, we'll be back here next week about this time, regardless of what happens, talking all things Giants for you. We appreciate everybody listening and enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the game this weekend and enjoy that sunny January 30-degree weather in Minnesota. And have a great week, everybody. Take care.